I love video games. They have the power to inspire you, the power to motivate you. They create these massive fantasies that pull you in and bring you on incredible adventures. They can fill you with wonder and introduce you to characters you end up idolizing, people that represent what it truly means to be a hero. There are games that leave their mark on you and stick with you forever. Games that you've played in your younger years, like Knights of the Old Republic and any of the Legend of Zelda games. You know, games that just stick with you and left their impressions. Scorn is one of those, but the impression it leaves on you isn't at all what I'd call a good one. And oh my God, do I feel like I need a shower even after finishing it in its entirety. To say that it left me and even still leaves me uncomfortable now would be an understatement, as the more I think about things I saw, the more they get to me. They really are with me right now. Scorn has a lot of phallic imagery and holes that you violate. So I guess there's that too. Zelda and Knights of the Old Republic didn't really have that going for them. I actually can't think of any in those instances. And come to think of it, no memorable life-changing title ever really has. Now, let me preface this whole review by saying that Scorn isn't a great game. It's one of those titles that I would classify under the train wreck category, but for entirely different reasons than most bad games I play these days. What sets Scorn apart from most other games that I've played and I've found unenjoyable is the fact that it's so freaking weird, gross, and utterly, truly disturbing that I just had to keep playing it, and I just had to keep going through its paces from start to finish. It's one of those experiences that is just so messed up and unnerving that even though the gameplay was average, the environment grew old super quickly and the puzzles were some of the most frustrating things I've ever endured. I just couldn't look away. It's really safe to say that there's nothing quite like this that has messed with me in so many new ways and subconscious ways. One thing I need to bring up before we get into the bulk of this review is that you should not go into Scorn expecting it to be a horror game, as it's not. It'll mess with your brain and make you feel uncomfortable in ways you're not used to while you play, but at no point did it ever scare me, and I don't think it's designed to. Let me explain what I mean, starting with the graphics. Scorn's definitely got that box checked for unique graphic style. The best way that I can summarize it is that someone who wanted to trigger everyone that had trypophobia designed an entire theme around it, but just didn't stop there. Then they thought, oh, okay, this will make everyone with that condition incredibly uncomfortable, but let's make it more gross. And that's the look they go for. Yeah, that's the type of game this is. The game looks disgusting. It doesn't look bad by any sense of the word, but it's not something you want to look at. Viscera is the theme, and it's absolutely plastered everywhere you look. The walls are made out of flesh and bone, the ground squishes when you walk on it, and everything, and I mean truly everything in the game, is designed to make you uncomfortable when you interact with it. Terminals are made out of flesh and involve you violating holes, keys, weapons, enemies, everything is gross and fleshy and all ties together in a single theme. Everything bleeds, everything is covered in a gross fleshy mucus most of the time, and it just never changes. Also, I said earlier, there's a lot of dicks in this game. Like a lot of dicks, a lot of dicks. You start seeing so many dicks that you get convinced that everything around you is a dick. There's that many dicks, and some of them, don't get me wrong, aren't directly dicks, but they look like dicks, and some are just straight up dicks. Now, as far as quality goes, it's good. The flesh, the gore, the grossness, all that, it looks great for what it is, while also not looking great. What I mean by this is, yeah, it's really visually impressive, but it just makes you wonder the whole time why anyone would put so much effort into making what I'm going to call visual gore porn look so good. There's wanting something to look good and then making it look so good you could tell the people who worked on it were passionate about that theme. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, and I honestly wonder what happened in the developers' lives to make this their passion, but there's no denying that it looks great for what they were going for, even if it's not great to look at, you know what I mean? Performance-wise, on a 3090, I did get some weird hitching and lower FPS issues on Ultra, but it was pretty solid. On my mid-tier testing PC, I did struggle to maintain a decent 60 FPS in some areas on my 2060, but I can say it never crashed or ruined the experience playing through. FPS doesn't really matter in Scorn. This isn't really a game that just needs frames, as all the visual stuff will still land on you at 30 FPS, and I wasn't able to get a copy of the Xbox version, but I'd have to assume it runs fine on the console itself. I'd say the most impressively disgusting stuff is just how all the technology in this universe visually looks, with the effects of fingering holes and pulling things open and violating terminals really making me shiver each time they appeared in front of me on my screen. There is one problem with all of this though. Because it's all so visually disgusting and impressively gross, you quickly become desensitized to it and start to feel like it's all the same. I'd say I was shook and impressed by the graphics of the game for about an hour or two, and that's record speed for me personally before it started to wane. I think part of your brain just shuts off when you're going through these levels, and I quickly found the looks to be visually boring and repetitive. Morbid curiosity turns into meh, another flesh terminal, or meh, more flesh walls, even in slightly different designs, and honestly I went from impressed to unimpressed by the end of my run. But that doesn't change that it looks good, I just was desensitized. It was like a one-trick pony visually, something that you look at for the initial reaction that burns itself out super fast in your brain if you're continually exposed to it. It was almost like becoming scent blind, but in my eyeballs. It's hard to explain. With everything being the same fleshy and blood look with the grossness everywhere you went, it kind of became incredibly difficult to navigate. It's been a long time since the visuals of a game made it really frustrating to explore, but in Scorn that's definitely the case. I was especially frustrated trying to figure out the game's intricate puzzles and mazes that we'll talk about soon. When every hallway looked like every other hallway, their visual style most definitely didn't do them any favors when it came to that. I suppose it's safe to say that their visuals were a double-edged sword, both gross and impressive, but also a huge downfall over the course of the entire playthrough. Sound design is spot on, however. I will give whoever worked on the ambiance, technology sound, squishiness, and general gross cadence of the game an A+. You nailed, audio-wise at least, what it would be like to be stuck in a giant technological flesh cocoon. Also, the phrase flesh cocoon, I've never used that before. At no point was I disappointed in the sickening sounds that played when I did anything, and some of them would continue to make me cringe even when the visuals had burned themselves out. Enemy design, as far as visual goes, suffer from the exact same problem that the world does. Don't get me wrong, there are a few interesting ones that only pop in once or twice as through a run, like this giant head man.
Are you prepared for the kind of death you've earned, little man?
But most of them completely lose flavor and kill your interest with how often they're thrown at you. They have janky animations, always look the same, and always do the exact same thing, and it's really important for me to say that they don't scare you. None of the enemies in this game are visually scary. They're just kind of little flesh animals or giant flesh animals that make squishy noises. Nothing comes close to the fear you get when you say you meet Pyramid Head for the first time in Silent Hill.
Bro, all right. Chat, we're done for the night completely.
And at no point was I afraid to go near an enemy except if I was low on hit points. They were just kind of basic. They served their purpose and their point, but didn't do it in any flashy manner. They weren't memorable, particularly horrifying, or generally impressive in any way that they come at you. We got to talk about the puzzles, and honestly, I think these single-handedly pull the game down several points for me. When I think of puzzle games, I think immediately of Myst, and this is clearly trying to be similar to Myst, but I feel like it misses that mark completely. Typically, when you have a puzzle, you need to lay out in some shape or form what the end goal is. You typically have a linear path or centralized area that is made for the puzzle, making it more about using your brain and solving a pattern or problem and such, rather than wandering around aimlessly trying to find the next part of the solution. Scorn chooses the later in a lot of its puzzles, and the best example is sadly one of the first ones right out the door at the beginning of the game. I think for the first hour and a half I played, I spent most of my time trying to figure out what to do in that first puzzle, as the solution for certain parts of it are neither intuitive or clever. In fact, one of the solutions to find is a stupid lever off in a side room that's tucked away in a giant loop where you can easily miss it a dozen times over like I did. It was gross. The puzzles in Scorn are honestly its worst sin, with each one completely breaking the pace of the game. It's really hard to get immersed in what's going on, and the gross horror aspects of it are really ruined when you're running into annoying brain games, with none of them being particularly good. They get old really quickly. It seems like every single area requires you to solve one of these dumb things, and they never seamlessly traction with what you're doing at the time. Why? Why would you hurt your game like this? I just don't get it. It conflicts so strongly with everything else. You'll be sneaking around, avoiding death and fighting mobs, only to come to a puzzle room and spend the next 20 minutes there, or more if you're dumb, being unable to progress if you can't figure it out. It's this constant loop of finishing a puzzle only to dread getting to the next one, and it's the weakest point. I did not like it. Couple this with samey looking navigation issues that I mentioned previously with the graphics, and yeah, you get where I'm going with this. I cannot overstate how abysmal some of them were. I get what they're going for, don't get me wrong. It's just horribly executed, and this alone would prevent me from ever wanting to play again. I could go into more detail about the types of puzzles or which ones were slightly better than others, but I won't. I found each and every one to be a negative in the game, and I would have much preferred body horror exploration without the missed puzzle mechanics. End of story in that regard. Inventory management, to its credit, is kind of cool in Scorn. Since everything is made out of flesh and living, in some way, you get a pretty unique ammo and health system when you're traversing through your environments. You also have 4 arms, which serve as your inventory screen when you pull it up, so that's cool. Ammo and health are supplied to a fat bloated tick at flesh terminals, with each one respectively looking like it's violating the poor animal when those resources are getting refilled. You use health sacks to replenish your health, and take off little pus blob containers for your weapons, with both of these resources being incredibly scarce and worth exploring for. The weapons are simply nozzles or attachments for this flesh tail thing you end up getting. Neat. Phallic in nature, and each and every time, but still awesome looking when you swap back and forth. You basically rip the tip of this tail off and cram another barrel onto it, and I can genuinely say that I've never seen this in another game. You've got your standard flare weapons like shotguns and pistols and a melee thing, all neat, with the weapons themselves never getting to the point of insanity or over the top like you'd get in a Doom game. Weapons are more of a means of progressing rather than a focus point, with them never being used for extensive periods of time, as you'll run out of bullets too fast if you use them consistently. I kind of feel like Scorn could have easily gone for the Doom route and done it in a grandiose fashion, but they clearly didn't want that, and it feels like they held themselves back in that regard. Because of this, combat is very samey. The weapons may look cool, but they don't feel cool. And every gun typically just devolves into waiting for the accuracy bloom to stabilize and then shooting an enemy in the head. There's no skill or flair or challenge to any fight, which is unfortunate. I would have preferred more in-depth or unique systems to complement fighting individual monsters, but there are none. They did add some kill animations for the melee gun at least, that's cool. But it really just is just skin and bones to the point of click and shoot, with no cover systems or interesting designs mechanically to support it. I think when I was describing it to another reviewer, I used the phrase plain turkey sandwich. It's there, it serves its purpose, but there's nothing interesting or elaborate about it. You're okay with it, but you get disappointed at knowing how much better it could have been and what more could have been added if the person who made it had wanted to. Ah, well. As far as story, well, good luck. I don't think there is much of one in Scorn, and after beating it through and through, I still don't understand what the fuck was going on. There's a lot of visual storytelling to explain why things are happening to you and where you came from, but not the overall plot. And honestly, I think I'm glad that they didn't go too far in depth in it. The game genuinely doesn't need a story, in my opinion. The idea of just being put into a messed up situation after another messed up situation and just doing your best to survive is good enough. Imagine waking up on an alien ship and everything's made out of flesh. You panic and struggle and try to escape. The lore of why you're there or how you got there doesn't really matter in the moment, and Scorn captures that well. The playtime, however, is extremely lacking. You can easily beat it in about less than 10 hours if you're lucky or smarter than I was at puzzles, and I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if there are less than 4-hour speedruns. I'd say for people who are into this kind of gore fest that it might be worth it to see how freaking weird it is, but if you're looking for a title you'll get your money's worth in playtime, this definitely is not it. It's kind of like paying a dumb amount of money to see a really messed up art gallery in person. You're there to enjoy the experience, but not to think about how long it takes for you to enjoy it, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes, because you want to feel validated by your purchase. You're not there for that. You're there for the visuals. Now let's move into the final breakdown. Gameplay gets a 4 out of 10. It's all painfully average and becomes incredibly samey very quickly. Puzzle, fight, puzzle, fight. It doesn't really have an identity when it comes to this. Story gets a 6 out of 10. It's all visual storytelling, but it does it very well. You don't really need a spoken story or written story to tell you things when you understand your situation visually. I would have liked more, but again, story is just short because it's a short game. Graphics get a 5 out of 10. They look incredible, which is a positive, but quickly become extremely samey and boring in the first hour or two. This was hard to rate as I both loved and hated them at the same time. Audio gets an 8 out of 10. Seriously, the audio is the best thing about Scorn. I never knew flesh and gore and guts could make so many sounds. This really made me shiver at times. And finally, value gets a 5 out of 10. For anyone who isn't interested in a messed up, unique experience, it's probably lower than a 5, but for the price, it's not bad. $40 is a lot to ask for 10 hours, but there's really nothing else quite like it, at least. In the end, I'm going to give Scorn a final review score of a 5 out of 10 in the Book of Delrith. It's incredibly unique and interesting, but the spectacle quickly wears out and it just becomes a chore to slog through. It's not a bad game, but it's not a good game, and I'd rate my experience overall as a meh, which is just an okay in my books. I don't suggest picking it up for the launch price in the slightest. Wait for a sale. As I said, you really only get one solid playthrough out of it, and that'll be that. I'd say $20 is a solid price point in the future. The thing is, you don't really play Scorn for the gameplay or game itself. You play it for the experience. Nothing quite has ever tickled my uncomfortable senses in this way, and this game did that. Even if it's not what I would call the best fun, it was refreshing to have a game that hit me different regardless. Anyway, that's going to be it for this review. If you liked the video, hit that freaking like button and share this video around. Otherwise, go back and watch other videos and let me know down in the comments below what games you'd like to see me cover in the immediate or near future. Thanks for watching. Until the next video, this is Delrith, and I'll be seeing ya. Bye.